Welcome to the Diary of Discovery, the podcast where we delve deep into the human experience of healing and transformation. I'm your host, Jacky Clarke, and each week we will sit down with inspiring individuals who have embarked on their own personal journeys of healing and self-discovery. From overcoming trauma to navigating life's challenges, our guests share their raw and honest stories, offering insights, wisdom, and hope to all who tune in. So grab your favorite cup of tea, find a cozy spot, and join us as we uncover the power of resilience, courage, and the pursuit of authenticity. This is the Diary of Discovery. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. So today is a different day. We are going to do our first solo episode with no guest interview and me just sharing some of the insights and some of my own personal learnings as we're going through this journey of having the podcast. And so much happens every single month, like the guests that we interview, the stories that we share, the learnings that come from all of these places. And I really wanted to tap in and start to shift the podcast a little bit. We're 18 months in now, which just blows my mind. We've had listeners from almost every continent. We've had guests from almost every continent. And it's just really, really incredible what we've created and the community that we've created. And going into this, I really had this feeling that I wanted to create a slightly different environment with the podcast community and not just share guest stories, but actually really dive into how you, as listeners, can develop your lives and better your lives and show up in a way that feels really, really authentic and just learn from the stories and how we show up. So having interviewed we're looking at 70 guests now, there is always key themes that come through and really show up for people in the podcast. And as we're going through, like, I really want to talk about each of these three things. There's going to be three core things we talk about today. I want to talk about each of these key things from stories of what's happened in my life over the last little while and really embed how we actually move through, how we actually show up differently, and what that means in the long run. Because I think it's really good to listen to people's stories and have that hope and that inspiration. But I really, really crave for this to be something more and for us to really lead on to change, to real structural change in people's lives, to really empower people to do something different. And I really hope that that is something that we can do for you as you listen. And I also really, really, really want to implore you to share the podcast with somebody. You have no idea how much it helps the podcast by you actually sharing it and getting somebody else to listen. And it's one of the easiest and free ways that you can support the creation of this content. This is something that I do completely outside of my business, completely outside of any of my money streams. It's not something that I have created any sort of financial revenue from. And you showing up and listening and sharing and leaving reviews and just like shouting about the podcast to other people who you think it could help is such a huge way that you can, with no financial output, you can support the channel, which I really, really hope that you like feel called to do as we go through this journey. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is this idea that our nervous system is just trying to keep us safe. And by doing that, it is focusing really heavily on keeping things the same. Because in the sort of processing of our nervous system and how our nervous system works, change is seen as a threat. If something is changing, it's an unknown, And even though logically, in this day and age, we know that not every change is going to be bad, and sometimes it's exactly what we need, our nervous system still isn't quite on board and quite caught up to the fact that this can be a good thing. And something that I noticed very recently, and it's something that I'm actually moving through at the moment that I'm trying to kind of navigate, was this idea of creating space. So, something that I talk about in my online business is this idea of creating freedom and looking at actually how do we create freedom that really like gives us everything that we want. So, one of the big shifts that I made this year in my business was I started to do really concentrated periods of work. So, I would go and work, say, for instance, for a month, and then I would be able to take off and lighten the workload for like 2 or 3 months. And what I did, like, so to start off this process, I did a really like concentrated period of work for 3 months. And during that time, I built up the revenue, I built up the reserves, I got everything I needed to pay for everything that was required for at least a 6 month period. And then I came home. So while I was doing this contract work, I was over in the UK. For anybody who's listening that doesn't know that I live in South Africa normally. And I then came home and the idea was I'd created space. And this is the first time that I've done this. And I got home and literally just found ways to make myself busy again. I found ways to make myself so busy that I was literally exhausted, literally exhausted within a couple of weeks of being home. And I was so shocked by this situation because I sat there and I was like, how am I back in this place of feeling like I don't have the freedom that I want? How am I back in this place of feeling so challenged and so stretched? And something that I teach is this idea of boundaries. And I have pretty good boundaries with most things, but what I've realized is that my nervous system is so uncomfortable with this ability to have space, and it brings up so many challenges for me because not only do I suddenly have time that I didn't have before that I don't know how to fill because I haven't actually gone through that process of thinking about what I want to do with that time, how I fill up my own cup, what that could look like, because I've got my like structured routines that I do already. And this was like so far out of that. But we also have this really interesting thought pattern that has been coming up for me. And I think that this is the thing that really shifted when I noticed this and I was able to do something with this. So, what's been coming up is this idea around, am I worthy of having this much time off? Am I worthy of being this financially abundant without working in the moment for that abundance? So, yes, I've done the work previously, and I had to keep telling myself, like, you've done the work to give yourself this space. But it was really, really challenging to go through that and realize how much of myself and my worth I tied to this identity of being busy, to this identity of being a business owner, to this identity of almost being like so productive that everyone is like looking at me in awe of the things that I could do. And I realized that actually my nervous system is completely fighting against the thing that I really want, which is freedom. So I had given myself like contained freedom. I had said, these are the times when you're allowed to be free. These are the times when you're allowed to do nothing. These are the times when it's safe and okay. And almost like you can justify it to other people and your own nervous system as to why you're free during those times. Whereas now I'm having to kind of work through that and say, I don't have to justify And I still am a little bit like, I still am in those moments being like, oh yeah, but I've already done the hard work in order to have this time off. Like, I shouldn't have to justify it. And I think that this is something that we can all look at in our lives. Like, where are we holding ourselves to patterns and to ideas where we're trying to justify why we deserve time off, why we deserve, the income that we want, why we deserve the support, the relationship, the outcome that we want. Like, why are we trying to force ourselves into this place? And a lot of the time, it's down to the beliefs that we hold, it's down to what we think we're worthy of. So this has really come up for me massively in this process of I've given myself all of this space and all of this freedom, but I'm finding it really hard to step into that on an energetic level and actually hold that space and say, I am deserving of this freedom. I am deserving of this space. I can like have slow mornings that last all the way until the afternoon. Like, I don't have to be busy all of the time. And this is something that it's still a work in progress. Like, I'm still going through the process. And today I took I'm going to say a big step in this process when I literally posted on my business Instagram that I had taken myself out for breakfast this morning while I was getting my car washed. And before, like, I would have only planned stuff like that, like after I had done my work for the day, after I'd like succeeded or achieved something. I wouldn't have planned that in immediately, like as a starting point. So I feel like that's a step in the right direction. And like, that's all this journey is. It's just like one step in the right direction every single time that we go through something. Speaking about steps in the right direction, the next thing that I want to talk to you guys about is nervous system trauma. So, something that I really underestimated and really haven't spoken about very much at all is the process of what happens when something quite traumatic happens and we have to process our way through that and then show up on the other side. So, to give you some context around this, I attempted to run my first marathon at the beginning of this year. I had trained so hard. I had done everything to the book, to the letter. I had done all of the runs, all of the training. I was so fit and so healthy and so ready to take part in this marathon. I got onto the start line, and other than the fact that I had started my period that morning of the race, which wasn't ideal, but not a game changer. Been getting my period for a couple of decades. I'm quite used to it by now. I genuinely thought like this is going to be the day. And I had prepared, like I had gotten so ready to celebrate this day. I had a bottle of champagne with a sticker stuck on it that was like, run your first marathon in 2025. Like, it was one of the goals that I'd set at the end of last year. And I had my tracking on my watch set up so that literally all of my family and friends could track me. My sister in the UK was tracking me, my parents. Um, all of my friends were like along the route because we were running close to home. Like, we started out in Cape Town and we were running back to where I live in the deep south. So there was literally like all of the support along the way. I ran the first 21 Ks by myself, and then my dad had signed up to the 21, like to the half marathon, and he had waited for me so then we could run the second half together. Like, we had literally like planned this thing within an inch of its life. And while I was on that run, I got to just over 40 kilometers. For anyone who doesn't know or speaks in different metrics, a marathon is 42.2 kilometers. So I got to just over 40 kilometers, and I collapsed. I literally collapsed. I was throwing up. I was cramping everywhere. I was pretty delirious. I ended up in an ambulance. And even though like logically, I was safe. Okay, so logically, like medically, I was not dying. I was absolutely like okay. My nervous system didn't know that. My nervous system didn't know that I was okay. And there were a couple of moments where, like, I genuinely, in the experience, thought that this was the end, which sounds really dramatic, but like is so true. One of the moments was when I got into the ambulance. I remember lying there. My dad was in the ambulance with me. And one of the big things was the paramedics asked me for my phone number. Now, my phone number I can recite off the top of my head. It's like the easiest thing. And I couldn't remember my phone number. I literally started the first three digits and then was just completely blank. And this was like the first sign for me that something wasn't right. And it really freaked me out. And then I was kind of really tuned into the fact that I couldn't make sentences, I couldn't hold conversations. Now, as I said, I was actually fine. Like my body just needed a bit of time to almost do a little bit of a reboot. And, within a couple of hours, like I was okay. But my nervous system didn't know that. And in that moment, when I was in the ambulance and we were driving back to the finish line, there was so much going on inside my nervous system, inside my body, inside that real panic of, I don't know if this is going to be okay. I don't know if I'm going to come out of the other end of this. And there were really weird things happening. So like obviously my speech was really affected and I couldn't speak. I couldn't string together thoughts. I couldn't find words for things. But the other thing that really caught me off guard was the fact that my vision was quite affected. And at one point I looked down at my legs and my legs literally, they looked so distorted that I thought that they were broken. It was like the weirdest experience. And as I was coming out of this and, like I was absolutely fine. We went back in the paramedics, in the ambulance with the paramedics, and gosh, within like 2 hours, they released me and I just needed to rest. I was brought home by my husband, had a cup of tea, like had a shower, got into bed, like had a rest. Within a couple of days, I was moving around absolutely fine. My legs were fine. Everything was good. But what I started to notice is suddenly running became really difficult. So my nervous system no longer saw running as a safe activity. It no longer saw running as what I used to use it for, which was a nervous system calmer. Like I literally ran through my depression and used it as the thing that made me better. And suddenly that thing, that fundamental like activity that I had used for so long became something that was actually causing my nervous system pain and making me really uncomfortable. And I found that I was shying away from runs or not wanting to run like long distances. And then after a little while, I actually realized that I was really disconnected from my body. I was really disconnected from my nervous system and like myself. I found it really, really hard to tap into my intuition, to show up in other spaces. So in my business, and like there were so many things that were being affected. And one of the things that I did is I reached out to one of my best friends, Zoe, who I run the Fearless You retreats with. And I said to her, listen, like I am not able to ground myself back into my body after this experience. And I would really appreciate it if you could ground me, if you could really help me with this. So we did that and like it really had a massive impact. And I was like, okay, good, we're done, we've done the thing. So I signed up to my next marathon and I was like, we're gonna do the thing, like we're gonna run the marathon, we're gonna get it done this year. Like that was always the plan. And I traveled to the UK, I did my contract, I continued to train and I was running, every second day. And I thought, like, I've got this cracked, like I've got this, like this is good. And then as I was returning home, I ended up getting COVID. And the marathon that I was meant to run was going to be Cape Town Marathon. And it was like 10 days after I landed home. And I ended up getting signed off on medical and basically being told that I couldn't run because my lung capacity wasn't good enough because I'd had COVID, and I was still coughing and still had some symptoms. And something really interesting happened because in that moment, instead of feeling all of the disappointment and all of the um, like sadness that I wasn't going to be able to achieve this goal and do this thing that I'd set for myself, I genuinely felt so relieved. I felt so relieved that I would not have to go through and actually run that marathon. And that was a really interesting point for me because it was a moment where I realized that my nervous system wasn't actually as recovered as I thought it was. Now, one of the things, like in that moment, I had two choices. So either I could say, okay, well, that goal obviously isn't important to me anymore, and I'm not going to worry about it, and I'm, not going to run the marathon, and it's going to be fine, and it doesn't matter. And that would have been absolutely fine. Like, I'm not saying that this has to be something that you just push through and, you get to the goal for the goal's sake. That's not the point. But the second part of this was this idea of I'm holding trauma in my body from this experience, and actually, I need to do what is going to feel best for me in order to get to a closing point of this. So I sat with it and I thought to myself, like, do I want to run a marathon? Is that actually something that fundamentally means something to me, that is important to me, that, you know, creates some sort of achievement for me? And the resounding answer to that was yes. And it's a really interesting thing because the whole journey to get to this point feels like it's so worth it. Like, all of these things have taught me something about myself and taught me something about my body and my nervous system and how far I can push myself and how I can show up for myself, even when things aren't working, even when things aren't exactly as we expect them to be. And so it was really easy for me to actually be like, yes, I want to do this. Now, then the question became, well, when am I going to do it? Because in reality, coming off the back of COVID, I wasn't able to run for a good like 6 weeks, which means that I've lost a lot of my fitness that I had built. And I'm no longer necessarily at marathon ready. Okay. But at the same time, there's a massive part of me that wanted to run this marathon this year in 2025. And that means that there's only one more opportunity. Now, one of the really big things that I really kind of felt into is that I don't want to make a massive deal of this. I don't want to run a race where I am running back to where I live. I don't want to run a race where everyone is tracking me. I basically want to just sneak away as quietly as possible and go and do the thing. So, one of the girls that I run with at the running club, this absolutely amazing woman, um, said to me, listen, there is a race. It's like 4 hours away from where we live. Let's do the weekend and let's just go run it. And she also recently had COVID. So she is not as marathon ready as she would want to be. And then my husband was like, yeah, I'm coming. I'm going to run it with you guys. And he's literally coming off a rolled ankle and hasn't run for a good couple of months. So he was like, I'm not ready, but come on, let's go do it. And then we literally had two other guys who, the same thing, like, are not 100% marathon ready, but they're going to come and run this marathon with us. And it just shifted the whole dynamic of, I get really emotional, like, speaking about this. Like, it shifted the whole dynamic of actually how my nervous system views this massive thing that we're going to go and do. Now, am I nervous? Yes, I 100% am nervous. At the point of recording this episode right now, we are literally 2 days out from the marathon. This is either going to be the most incredible process and we're gonna finish strong and be within cutoff and pop that bottle of champagne that's got a sticker on the front. Or we're not gonna finish and that's gonna be okay as well. And I'll update you guys. I'll let you know how we go on in the next solo episode. But I really just wanted to share this idea of when we hold trauma in our body, it's really important that we actually give it the space and the time. I was so sure that I had like ticked the box and moved through this thing that I stopped looking at it. I stopped listening to my body around how it felt. And I started to just push through the training runs, like get myself to the point where I was like ready to do the thing. And actually, I genuinely feel like if I'd listened to my body sooner and I had actually worked through this energy that was stored in my body in a more productive way over a longer period of time, I probably would be more marathon ready right now. Well, that's a really, it's a really bold statement to make because obviously we can only be where we are right now. We can't change the past. We can only, work towards the future. But I think that it's a really, really interesting thing that I just wanted to share and get you to think about like, where has something happened where you are not giving it the time and the space to actually move through you? Where are you not looking at something and thinking, how does that actually impact me? Like, I think one of the big things for me, because my logical brain said to myself, like, said to me, I was never actually in danger. I almost felt like ridiculous that my nervous system felt so threatened. Like, it felt like I was being such a drama queen to be like, I genuinely thought I was going to die when actually, like, medically, I was fine. But I think that, like, that's the point. Like, your nervous system doesn't work in logic, it doesn't work in medical terms, it doesn't work in that same structured idea of what is danger and what is not. And we have to accept that. Like, we have to work with our nervous system and understand that. And I think this whole process has made me understand that on such a deeper level. And there was also another kind of lesson, and this is the third thing that I want to talk about, which came out of the same concept. And I think like it's almost been present in both of the scenarios that I've spoken about. And I've also had a lot of conversations on the podcast with guests who have spoken about this as well. And this is this idea of moving the goalposts either like just before we get to the goal or as we get to the goal, and then just constantly striving forward for the next thing. Now, you can absolutely strive. Please strive. I absolutely love it. But I think that the caveat here needs to be you have to give yourself a stabilization period. And I think like that is the thing that myself and a lot of the guests have realized as we've gone through this process of healing, of up leveling, of going to the next level, that actually a lot of the time we don't give ourselves enough space to stabilize into the level that we're in. So we stay in this constant flux of discomfort. And then when something doesn't feel right or safe or good, instead of stabilizing back to the level we're on, we actually stabilize back to the previous level that we were at and we run backwards to safety. So I want you to really think about like what's the goalpost or what has the goalpost been this year or the goal that you're aiming for, and how do you genuinely stabilize at that place? How do you genuinely show up and celebrate the thing and stabilize yourself and your nervous system into this being the new norm, this being what we do, this being how we show up, this being who we are, before we go on to the next thing and go, okay, instantly, I want to do this now. I want to reach for the next goal. Now, I see this in business really often. So, a lot of my clients that I work with one to one, will literally say, okay, like my big goal this year is I want to hit X number in revenue. Or one of my clients literally said to me, I want to sell X number of tickets for my live event. And I was like, amazing, let's do it. And we started the process. Now they like initially they were like they want to sell 20 places for this event. Let's use this as an example because it's so good. And I was like, amazing, let's do it. So we started to advertise, we started to look at the strategy, we started to build this process. And as we were going through, every single 2 weeks, we would meet for a one-to-one call. And I would say, what are the numbers? Like, how are the numbers? How are the numbers? And we were, I think, like 3 months out from this event, and they had sold 20 places. They'd done it, they'd hit the goal. And instantly, we got on a call, and the first thing that my client opened with was, okay, I want to sell 30 tickets. And I was like, whoa, 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 hold on. You said you want to sell 20 tickets. And she was like, yeah, yeah, I've sold 20 now. So, like, we're going to up it to 30. Like, the room can hold more people. Like, I've asked the venue. And I was like, hold fire. I was like, yes, we can absolutely sell 30. We can absolutely do that. That's absolutely fine. However, can we just backtrack for 1 second and just stabilize into that you are the person who has sold 20 tickets to your live event with like 3 months to go before this event even happens? Can we stabilize into like that is more than last year that you sold up until the point of the event going live? Can we stabilize into the fact that this is possible for you in every single event that you create? And actually, you can up your numbers on every single event that you create, not just this one. And it was a really interesting conversation because actually stopping and stabilizing, we had a really good conversation of like what had been the most successful in order to get those sales. Like, what do we need to build into the strategy for next year to make the sales even easier? How are we going to get more sales? Like, where are we like letting sales slip through the net that we're not focusing on? And suddenly, not only did she stabilize into this new energy and this new space of being the person who sells out their event literally, 3 months in advance, which is incredible, but also, okay, we can take more, we can get a bigger room at the venue, we can up the numbers, we can go on this process. And at the same time, because we looked at where sales were coming from, where sales were left like on the table, we actually created a list of people she could go back to and say, by the way, there are tickets available, like you can come in. Now, she ended up selling out the event a second time at the higher number, which was incredible. Again, like a couple of weeks before it was even due to go live. And this was such a shift, like such a shift in how she shows up, like what she does in her business. And again, as soon as she achieved that, we stabilized. We stabilized into that place of saying, actually, this is who we are now. This is the energy that we hold now. This is how we show up now. And it's so interesting because off the back of that stabilization, not just moving the goalpost, she literally came back to me and said, I'm going to rebrand the whole business. Like, I'm actually going to change the whole business or the branding, because I feel like this is actually a bigger thing now. Like, I can see what we can create now that I'm actually in this new place and I've taken a minute to just stop and appreciate all of the stuff that we're doing, how we're showing up, like her and her team, like, what this all looks like. And it was so incredible to witness in that moment when we actually stabilize into the goal and we stop just pushing, we stop just going the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. It becomes so potent and powerful as to how we show up in everything else. So, whether this is in business, whether this is in your career, whether this is with your family or your relationships, or whether this is with your health or how you show up in the world, like I want you to really think about where have you been moving the goalposts without appreciating and stabilizing into the place that you're in? Where have you been pushing without actually saying, oh my gosh, look how far I've come? And like, I would love if you've got a piece of paper close to you, like just grab a piece of paper or your phone and just like make a list of the amazing things that you've achieved already this year. Like, what are the goals that you've ticked off that you've just like glossed over and just pushed for the next thing? And when you actually sit down and do this, it's so incredible how much we achieve, like how much we do that we don't actually give ourselves credit for, that we don't actually stabilize into. And when we stabilize, we're creating a new version of ourselves. We're saying, actually, this is the new standard. This is the new expectation. This is the new vibration, the new level, the new energy, the new way that we show up in the world. And that shifts everything. So I really want to kind of leave you with that idea of like, what does this look like for you? Genuinely, what are the goals that you have overlooked? What are the amazing things that you've achieved this year? And how can you stabilize into that energy and really show up for yourselves to move to that next level rather than just like rushing from run to run to run and like trying to climb this ladder where it suddenly feels like you're playing snakes and ladders. It suddenly feels like if you get one thing wrong, you're just going to slide all the way back down to the bottom and have to start again because you haven't actually brought yourself to that level, built a foundation and said, we're here, this is the new, the new spot, and now we're going to lift the ladder and then start climbing again. Like, it's such a different energy. So I really want to leave you with that as a concept. And again, like, I'm so appreciative to every single person who tunes in and listens to the podcast. Like, you don't understand how much it means to me that this podcast gets listened to on so many, like, by so many people across the world. This was such a dream for me to have this platform and be able to share other people's stories, and now to bring in my own learning and my own stories and really share. So if you have a story that you would love to share with us, I would absolutely love for you to fill out the application in the show notes below the podcast. That is the best way to get onto the podcast as a speaker and share your own story to inspire and help people. If you've got anything that is unique, any ways of dealing with things, any, trauma situations that you've moved through, we absolutely would love to hear your unique take on how you've done this journey. And then secondly, if you've listened to the podcast for the last year or year and a half, and you've been thinking like, I really want to do more work in this space, I really want to like show up in this space, I've included a one-to-one offer in the show notes as well. This is a space to grow one-to-one where you can work with me over a period of time, anywhere from 3 to 6 months, and really focus on your own growth and how you show up in the world. So if you're interested in that, you can go and have a look, and you can reach out to me on the podcast socials, on Instagram, The Diary of Discovery, and we can have a chat, like no obligation. But I just wanted to put it out there that I'm so, so open to helping and moving people through this space. And I would absolutely love to work more closely with some of our listeners and get in touch with more of you. I would absolutely love, if you've loved this episode, for you to reach out on Instagram, leave a review on your favorite platform, anything to let me know that this is something that you want more of and something that you've enjoyed. And definitely, please stop right now, take the podcast link and share it with one person, because if everyone just shares the podcast with one person, we can literally double the number of listeners, and that will make such a big difference to getting the podcast in front of new people. So I'm going to love and leave you there. Thank you so much for being part of our first solo episode. And I cannot wait to do this again next month when we dive into some more fun stories and some more learnings from the past guests. I will chat to you guys soon. Thank you for listening to another inspiring episode of The Diary of Discovery. If you found value in today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends, family, or anyone else you think might benefit from the stories of hope and transformation. Your feedback means the absolute world to us, so please take a moment to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your reviews help us to reach even more listeners and continue to bring this meaningful content to the world. Until next time, remember, your healing journey is valid. You are never alone, and you have the strength to get through this. Keep shining bright, and we'll see you in the next episode of The Diary of Discovery.